Hey guys, tonight we're going to step back in time. Not to a grand battle or a royal court, but to a seemingly ordinary afternoon in London, just before the world changed forever. We're going to experience the London Blitz from the ground up, and let's be honest, most of us, myself included, probably wouldn't have lasted a single night. The sheer psychological weight of it all is something we can barely imagine. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop a comment and let me know what city you're listening from, and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see where we all are. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It's the last week of August, 1939th. The air in London is thick and warm, carrying that unique late summer scent of sun-baked pavement, cut grass from the royal parks, and the faint, ever-present hint of coal smoke. You're standing on a corner in a quiet, residential street, maybe somewhere in Kensington or Islington. The light has that soft, golden quality, making the rows of brick houses and their tidy front gardens seem almost impossibly peaceful. The bright red double-decker bus rumbles past, its windows open, the faces inside looking drowsy in the afternoon heat. A few children are playing a game of tag on the pavement, their shouts echoing softly between the buildings. It's all so very normal, deceptively normal. You take a stroll towards the local park. Here, the sense of peace is even stronger. People are lounging on striped deck chairs, reading newspapers or novels. Couples walk hand in hand along the paths, and a distant brass band is playing a somewhat lazy tune. But as you walk, you notice something odd, something that doesn't quite fit the idyllic scene. Near the edge of the beautifully manicured lawn, there are long fresh scars in the earth. Men in work clothes are digging deep trenches, the piles of brown soil looking stark and ugly against the green grass. It's a strange sight. Some people stop and stare at the digging, a flicker of unease in their eyes before they quickly look away, as if ignoring it might make it go away. These trenches, meant to be rudimentary air raid shelters, are the first physical signs that the rumblings of war in Europe are about to spill over into your daily life. You pass a newsstand, the bold headlines of the evening paper screaming words like CRISIS, ULTIMATUM, and DANSEIG. Everyone knows what's happening, of course. For months, the news from the continent has been getting steadily worse. Last year, Prime Minister Chamberlain came back from Munich waving a piece of paper, promising peace for our time. A fragile peace that now feels like a distant memory. The city is holding its breath. To escape the growing tension in the air, you duck into a nearby pub. The cool, dark interior is a welcome relief from the sun. It smells of wood polish, stale beer, and pipe tobacco. You order a pint of bitter and find a small table in the corner. The low hum of conversation fills the room. It's all about one topic. A man with a thick mustache at the bar is saying loudly, "Let him try it. We taught them a lesson once. We can do it again." His friend, looking more worried, just shakes his head and stares into his glass. A government-issued pamphlet sits forgotten on a nearby windowsill. Its title, Some Things You Should Know If War Should Come. It's a surreal little detail. And this is a point that historians still debate with considerable passion. What was the real mood of the British public in these final days of peace? Was it the stoic, stiff upper-lip defiance that propaganda would later celebrate, or was it a deep, gnawing anxiety, masked by a desperate attempt to carry on as normal? The truth, as you can feel in the air of this pub, is likely a complex, messy mix of both. For every defiant voice, there's a quiet, fearful glance. For every person trying to enjoy the last days of summer, there's an undercurrent of dread. You finish your drink and step back out into the evening. The sun is lower now, casting long shadows down the street. The gas lamps are beginning to be lit, their gentle glow pushing back against the encroaching twilight. The sky above is a canvas of soft pinks and purples, serene and untroubled. You look up at that vast, peaceful expanse, completely oblivious to the fact that soon you will learn to fear it. That same sky will become a stage for searchlights, anti-aircraft fire, and a steady, terrifying drone of enemy planes. But for now, it's just a beautiful end to a summer day. You walk home, the familiar click of your shoes on the pavement a comforting rhythm. For this one last night, the world still makes a kind of sense. You wake up the next morning, and for a blissful moment, everything feels the same. But it's not. It's Sunday, September 3rd, and the air is thick with a tension you could cut with a knife. The government's ultimatum, delivered to Germany, expires at 11 a.m. Everyone knows there's a strange, heavy quietness over the city. Fewer cars are on the road. The usual Sunday morning sounds the clatter of milk bottles. The distant peal of church bells seem muted, as if the city itself is holding its breath. You don't have much of an appetite for breakfast. You and your family move around the house in a kind of slow motion, exchanging brief, worried glances. The clock on the mantelpiece seems to be ticking louder than ever before, each tick a countdown. Just before 11, you all gather in the living room around the wireless. It's a handsome wooden cabinet, a piece of furniture that usually brings music and entertainment into the home. Today, it feels like an oracle about to deliver a terrible prophecy. You turn the knob, and after a moment of static and crackle, the solemn, clipped tones of a BBC announcer fill the room. He says very little, just that the Prime Minister will be addressing the nation. Then a brief pause, filled only by the low hum of the radio, at 11:15. And Neville Chamberlain's voice comes through the speaker. It's not a strong, booming voice. It sounds weary, reedy, and profoundly sad. He recounts the final diplomatic efforts, the refusal from Berlin. You lean in, straining to catch every word, and then they come. The words that will define your life for the next 6 years. He says, consequently, this country is at war with Germany. The words just hang there in the silent room. There's no dramatic music, no sound effects, just the Prime Minister's tired voice and the faint crackle of the broadcast. It's a strangely mundane way to have your world turned upside down. Someone in the room lets out a small, shaky breath. You look at your family's faces. Your father's jaw is set, his eyes fixed on some distant point. Your mother quietly picks up a teacup, her hand trembling just slightly. It's in these small, intimate moments that history is actually felt. And just as you're trying to process this monumental news, something else happens. A new sound. A sound you've only read about in pamphlets. It starts slow, a distant moan, and then climbs, higher and higher, into a terrifying, undulating wail that seems to come from every direction at once. The air raid siren. It's real. It's happening. Panic, raw and undignified, flashes through the room. All the drills, all the pamphlets, suddenly feel like a joke. The half-dug trench in the garden, the cellar, filled with junk you scramble, grabbing a coat, fumbling with the door, your heart hammering against your ribs. Out on the street, it's a scene of confused, frightened activity. People are pointing at the sky. A neighbor is trying to herd his terrified children under the stairs. The wail of the siren is overwhelming, a physical presence that vibrates in your bones. For 10 solid minutes, you are utterly convinced that a bomb is about to fall on your head. This right here is one of those wonderfully bizarre little footnotes of history. That first air raid warning, which sent millions of Londoners into their first terrified scramble for shelter just minutes after war was declared. A lone, friendly French aircraft had been misidentified. But you don't know that. For you, in that moment, the war has arrived with terrifying speed. When the steady, continuous note of the all-clear finally sounds, the relief is so immense it leaves you feeling weak and a little foolish. You look around at your neighbors, sharing awkward, shaky smiles. The immediate danger has passed, but something has been broken forever, the illusion of safety. The rest of your Sunday is spent not in prayer or quiet reflection, but in clumsy, practical work. You and your family struggle with rolls of thick, black paper and tacks, trying to cover every window in the house. This is the blackout. It's a frustrating task. The paper tears. The tacks bend. You can't get the corners right, and tiny, treasonous slivers of light keep peeking through. It feels absurd, this battle with paper and tape, but you know, with a chilling certainty, that it's now a matter of life and death. Historians still sift through diaries and letters from this day, trying to capture the true public mood. Was it relief that the agonizing wait was finally over? Was it a surge of patriotism and a grim determination to see it through, or was it, for most, a deep and hollow dread? The answer, you suspect, is all of the above. You felt all of it in the space of a single hour. As you finally finish the last window, plunging your home into a premature, stuffy darkness, you know that the London you knew this morning is gone. A new, uncertain chapter has begun. The weeks that follow the declaration of war are strange, anticlimactic, and deeply unsettling. You have braced yourself for the apocalypse, for skies raining fire and streets turning to rubble. Instead, what you get is nothing, a profound, nerve-wracking quiet. This period would later be nicknamed the Phony War in Britain, or the Sitzkrieg Sitting War by the Germans. For you, living in London, it just feels like a bizarre, extended dress rehearsal for a play that never starts. The city has transformed itself for a war that refuses to arrive. The streets, once bright and welcoming at night, are now canyons of absolute blackness. The blackout regulations are enforced with a surprising ferocity. You try to navigate your way home one evening and find it a terrifying experience. With no streetlighted, no glowing shop windows, not even a lit cigarette allowed in public, you are functionally blind. You shuffle along, one hand outstretched, feeling for familiar walls and lampposts. The curb seems to leap out of nowhere, nearly twisting your ankle. Every pedestrian is a shadowy, silent figure who materializes a foot in front of you, leading to a series of muttered apologies. It's a sensory deprivation experiment on a city-wide scale. This brings us to a rather grim, and often overlooked, historical fact. During the first year of the war, more civilians in Britain were killed by accidents in the blackout than by enemy action. People fell into canals, stepped in front of buses they couldn't see or hear, or simply tripped on uneven pavement and suffered fatal injuries. The cure, in this early stage, was arguably more dangerous than the disease. Your days are punctuated by the absurdities of this new reality. Sandbags are piled high around the entrances to important buildings, looking like sad, lumpy fortifications against an invisible enemy. The grand statues of kings and generals in public squares are encased in protective wooden scaffolding, making them look like they're being prepared for shipping. The parks where you once enjoyed a lazy afternoon are now a mess of trenches and giant, ugly barrage balloons. Elephantine objects float lazily in the sky, tethered to the ground by thick cables. Their purpose is to snag low-flying enemy aircraft, a defense mechanism that feels both ingenious and slightly comical. You look up at them, and you're not sure whether to feel reassured or just more anxious. Life is a strange mix of the old and the new. You still go to work. The pubs are still open, though you have to feel your way to the door, and people still queue for the cinema. But there's an undercurrent of constant, low-grade anxiety. Everyone is carrying a small cardboard box containing a gas mask. It's a mandatory accessory. You're supposed to have it with you at all times. It bumps against your hip as you walk, a constant, physical reminder of the potential horror that awaits. There are drills where you have to practice putting it on. The mask smells of rubber and disinfectant. The celluloid eyepieces fog up immediately, and it makes a deeply unpleasant raspberry sound when you breathe. The thought of actually having to wear it for real is terrifying. In this strange lull, a peculiar kind of gallows humor begins to sprout. People joke about the blackout, about the food, about the sheer boredom of it all. The only thing attacking London right now, a comedian quips on the radio, is a wave of government pamphlets. It's a coping mechanism, a way to release the tension that has nowhere else to go. And here, academics still debate the psychological impact of the phony war. Did this period of inactivity breed complacency, making the eventual shock of the Blitz even worse, or did it provide a crucial, if unintentional, period for the city's civil defense to get organized, for shelters to be built, and for the public to mentally adjust to the reality of being at war? There's no easy answer. For you, it feels like living in a state of suspended animation. You are caught between the memory of peace and the expectation of violence. One afternoon, you see a line of children, each with a gas mask box slung over their shoulder and a label tied to their coat, being led onto a train at Paddington Station. They are evacuees being sent away from the city to the presumed safety of the countryside. You watch their small, bewildered faces pressing against the train windows as it pulls away, and the reality of the situation hits you with a fresh wave of sadness. The city is so convinced of its own imminent destruction that it is sending its children away. And still, the bombs don't fall. The sky remains stubbornly, unnervingly empty. The quiet is the loudest sound in London. The phony war shatters not with a whimper, but with a series of brutal, terrifying bangs. It's Saturday, September 7th, 1940th, a date that will be seared into the memory of every Londoner. The day has been deceptively beautiful, warm and sunny, with a clear blue sky. You've almost become numb to the threat, lulled by nearly a year of false alarms and quiet nights. You might even be out into your dig for victory vegetables, feeling a sliver of normality. Then, in the late afternoon, it begins. It's not the sound of the sirens, not at first. It's a different sound. A deep, resonant drumming that seems to come from everywhere at once. It's a sound you've heard in newsreels but never in real life. It's the sound of hundreds of aircraft engines. You look up, shielding your eyes against the sun. The sky, which was clear just moments ago, is now filled with dark specks. They are flying in tight, disciplined formations, glinting in the afternoon light. Almost beautiful sight, until you realize what you're looking at. This isn't a drill. This isn't a friendly squadron. This is the Luftwaffe. And then, just as your mind is struggling to process the scale of what you're seeing, the sirens begin to wail. But this time, they don't sound like a warning. They sound like a scream of pure terror, a desperate, futile cry against the inevitable. Panic erupts. Not the confused, slightly awkward panic of that first false alarm a year ago. This is primal, heart-stopping fear. Shouts echo down the street. Get in the shelter. The world seems to shrink to a single, desperate objective: get underground. You scramble, stumbling over your own feet, your breath catching in your throat. The thrumming of the engines grows louder, a malevolent, all-encompassing roar that seems to vibrate right through your skull. It feels personal. It feels like they're coming for you. You'd dive into whatever shelter. You have the flimsy-looking Anderson shelter in the garden, the cramped cellar under the house, or you're running down the street towards the nearest public shelter. As you pull the door shut, plunging yourself into semi-darkness, the first explosions begin. They are not like anything you could have imagined. It's not just a loud noise. It's a physical force. The ground heaves and bucks violently like a ship in a storm. The air is punched out of your lungs by the concussion. Each explosion is a multi-layered event at deafening crump that you feel in your teeth, followed by the high-pitched tinkle of shattering glass from houses nearby, and then a low grinding roar as masonry gives way and buildings collapse, which felt so reassuring just moments before, now feels terrifyingly fragile, like a cardboard box in an earthquake. This first major raid, which historians now refer to as the start of the Blitz proper, deliberately targeted the East End of London and the docks. It was a strategic attack aimed at crippling the city's important industrial heartland. But for you, huddled in your shelter miles away, all you know is that your world is being torn apart by an unseen, thunderous violence. You can smell it too, a strange, acrid smell of high explosives, and soon the smell of smoke, thick and choking, seeping through the cracks in the shelter door. A fascinating and little-known detail from that first day is the sheer confusion it caused. Because the attack was so concentrated on the East End, the initial belief among the High Command was that it was a prelude to a German invasion of the Kent coast. It took them precious hours to fully grasp that this was a new type of warfare, a direct, sustained assault on the civilian population of the capital itself. Inside your shelter, time ceases to have meaning. Minutes stretch into an eternity. The bombing is relentless. There are no pauses. It's just a continuous, rolling barrage of noise and vibration. You huddle with your family or with strangers, your bodies press close together. No one speaks. There's nothing to say. You just listen, flinching with every fresh explosion, trying to guess how close it is. Is that one a street away, a block away? Is the next one for us? And this is where the psychological battle truly begins, a point that is often lost in the grand narratives of the war. Historians can document the number of planes and the tonnage of bombs, but they still struggle to articulate the sheer mental endurance required to sit in a dark, damp hole while the world outside is being systematically destroyed. It's the helplessness that is so corrosive. There is absolutely nothing you can do but wait and hope that the random lottery of destruction does not pick your number. The phony war is over. The real war, you now understand, is a war of nerves. And it has just begun in the most terrifying way imaginable. Let's talk about your shelter. Specifically, let's talk about that glorified tin can buried at the bottom of your garden, the Anderson shelter. Before the bombs started falling for real, it was just a strange new feature of the suburban landscape. Now, it's the most important piece of real estate you own. You probably got it delivered in flat pack from months ago, a pile of corrugated steel sheets and a bag of bolts. The government had distributed about 1.5 million of them for free to lower-income families before the war. Putting it together was a weekend project, a frustrating puzzle of lining up holes and tightening nuts until your knuckles were raw. You had to dig a 4-foot-deep hole in your prize-winning rose patch, lower the steel shell into it, and then cover it all over with the excavated soil. It looked like a strange, metallic molehill at the end of your garden. Now, as you sit inside it during a raid, you have a very intimate relationship with this small space. It's 6 feet high, 4.5 feet wide, and 6.5 feet long. It's designed to hold up to 6 people, a claim that is technically true in the same way that a telephone box can technically hold 6 people. It's cramped. You're sitting on a hard wooden bench or maybe an old mattress, your knees knocking against the person opposite you. The air is already getting stale and damp. The curved steel walls sweat with condensation, which drips down your neck with infuriating regularity. It smells of damp earth, rust, and fear. But this crude little structure is an engineering marvel in its own way. It wasn't designed to take a direct hit. Nothing could survive that. It was designed to withstand the blast wave and the debris from a bomb landing nearby. The curved shape was brilliant at deflecting the force of the explosion, and the thick layer of earth on top could absorb the impact of falling bricks and shrapnel. You can hear it working. You hear the sickening thud of debris hitting the earth above you, and you send a silent thank you to Mr. William Patterson and Sir John Anderson, the engineers who designed it. Here's a quirky little fact: the government issued very specific instructions on how to behave inside your Anderson shelter. They recommended bringing a light occupation to keep your mind off the bombing. Things like knitting or playing cards were highly encouraged. There's something wonderfully, tragically British about the idea of sitting in a metal box during an apocalypse, calmly knitting a scarf. In reality, your hands are probably shaking too much to hold the needle steady. You just listen. The sound is different in here. It's muffled, but also amplified in a strange way. The roar of the planes, the whistle of the falling bombs, a sound that has been described as being like tearing a giant piece of calico cloth, and the crump of the explosions are all transmitted through the ground. You feel them as much as you hear them. The entire shelter shudders and groans around you with each nearby impact. There's a constant debate in your mind, and indeed among historians, about the effectiveness of the Anderson shelter. Did it create a false sense of security, or was it a vital lifesaver that prevented tens of thousands of casualties? The statistics lean heavily towards the latter. People who stayed in their Anderson shelters had a remarkably high survival rate compared to those who remained in their houses. But statistics are cold comfort when you're the one sitting inside, listening to the world and just a few feet above your head. You try to make it more homely. You might have a candle stub burning, casting long, dancing shadows on the curved walls. You have a flask of tea, a tin of biscuits, and a bucket in the corner for a toilet. This is your life now, reduced to its bare essentials in a 6x4-foot hole. As the raid wears on, the initial terror gives way to a kind of grim, exhausted resignation. You might even doze off, your body slumping against a family member, only to be violently jerked awake by a particularly close explosion. This is how you will spend your nights for the foreseeable future. The journey from your back door to the Anderson shelter, a distance of maybe 20 feet, becomes the most perilous journey of your life. And this damp, cramped, smelly little burrow becomes your sanctuary, your prison, and your best hope for seeing the sunrise. The molehill at the bottom of the garden is now the center of your universe. You're inside your Anderson shelter, the candle stub casting flickering shadows on the damp, curved walls. The initial, heart-stopping terror of the first explosions has subsided into a state of high alert exhaustion, and now you become attuned to a new sound. It's not the sharp, sudden violence of a bomb. It's a constant, oppressive presence, a sound that gets under your skin and into your bones. It's the drone, the ceaseless, unwavering thrum of the German bombers' engines. Tonight, it is the sound of the Heinkel He-111th. You don't know its name, of course. To you, it's just them, but you're getting to know its voice intimately. Unlike the smooth, harmonious roar of a British Spitfire or Hurricane, the Heinkel to engines have a distinctive, slightly unsonorized sound. It creates a pulsating, throbbing beat in the air, a rhythmic WU, MWU, 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 that seems to rise and fall as the planes circle overhead. It's a sound that old Londoners will be able to recall with perfect clarity 70 years later. It's the signature tune of the Blitz. At first, you try to track it. You listen intently, trying to gauge if it's getting closer or moving away. Is it directly overhead? Are you in the crossroads right now? This auditory guesswork is a futile, nerve-shredding exercise. There are hundreds of them up there, spread out across the vast, blacked-out canvas of the city. The sound comes from everywhere at once, a blanket of noise that smothers everything else. It's the soundtrack to your fear. And this leads us to a fascinating piece of wartime psychology. The sound of the engines was, for many, more terrifying than the explosions themselves. The explosions were a terrifying release, a moment of brutal finality. But the drone was the suspense. It was the sound of the station of thousands of pounds of high explosives hanging directly over your head. It was the sound of helplessness. You could do nothing but listen to it, circling like a shark, waiting, huddled in your shelter. You can almost picture the scene up there, thousands of feet above. Young men, not much older than you, are sitting in the vibrating fuselages of their aircraft. They are cold, probably frightened, and focused intently on their instruments. They are following the faint, silvery ribbon of the River Thames, their primary navigational aid, or looking for the hellish glow of the fires started by the wave of bombers that came before them. London is not a city of homes and lives, it's a target map. a dark shape punctuated by the flashes of anti-aircraft guns from below. Historians, sifting through the flight logs and diaries of Luftwaffe pilots, have pieced together a complex picture. Many were fervent believers in their cause, convinced they were striking a decisive blow to win the war. Others were just professional airmen doing a job, detached from the reality of the destruction they were causing on the ground. A surprising number wrote of the terrifying beauty of the scene, the searchlights, the glowing fires, the tracer fire arcing up towards them, a deadly firework display. One particularly odd detail that emerged from post-war interviews was the smell. The German aircrews could often smell the burning city from 10,000 feet up, the smell of burning wood, of soot, and of the peculiar caramel scent of the Lyle sugar refinery, which took a direct hit and smoldered for days, wafted up into the night sky. Back in your shelter, you don't know any of this. All you know is the sound. It worms its way into your brain. Even when there's a brief lull, you can still hear it, and phantom echo in your ears. It becomes the background hum to your existence. During the day, any loud, droning noise, a bus engine, a factory machine, can make your stomach clench and your head whip towards the sky. The sound is reprogramming your survival instincts. There is a continuing debate among military historians about the effectiveness of this area bombing strategy. Was the goal primarily to destroy industrial targets, or was it, as many suspect, a deliberate attempt to break civilian morale through psychological terror? The strategy was called terror and grift era attacks in some internal German documents. Listening to that relentless, soul-crushing drone, night after night, you have absolutely no doubt what the answer is. It's a weapon in itself, designed to grind you down, to make you feel hunted, to make you pray for the dawn. But the dawn is still hours away, and the drone continues, unwavering, eternal. WUMWUMW. The droning of the planes overhead is the long, terrifying prelude. But sooner or later, the prelude ends and the main event begins. This is the moment when a single sound detaches itself from the cacophony. It's a high-pitched, piercing whistle. A sound that seems to get louder and louder, closer and closer, as if it's screaming your name. It's the sound of a bomb falling, and for the few seconds that it lasts, your entire world shrinks to that single descending shriek. There is nothing you can do. You are frozen. Your body tenses up. You instinctively duck your head, bracing for an impact that may or may not come. It is the most intimate and personal sound of the Blitz. The droning engines are the collective threat. The whistling bomb is aimed squarely at you. Or at least, that's what it feels like. Every person who hears it is convinced it is meant for them. Then comes the impact. Let's say this one is close. Not a direct hit. If it were, you wouldn't be experiencing anything at all. But close enough. First, there is a flash of brilliant, silent, white light, so intense it penetrates the cracks in your sheltered door and imprints itself on the back of your eyelids. For a split second, the world is illuminated in a ghostly, skeletal glare. Immediately after the flash comes the shockwave. It is a solid wall of pressure that hits your shelter with the force of a giant's fist. The ground beneath you jolts upwards with sickening violence. The air is physically slapped out of your lungs. Your ears pop painfully. Loose dirt and dust rain down from the ceiling of the shelter, and the candle flame is instantly extinguished, plunging you into absolute, ringing darkness. Then and only then does the sound arrive. It is not an explosion you hear with your ears, it's a concussion you feel with your whole body. A deafening, gut-punching crump that vibrates through your bones and teeth. It's a sound so loud it feels solid. For a moment after, there is a strange, ringing silence. The drone of the planes is temporarily erased. Your ears are screaming with tinnitus, and then the secondary sounds begin, the sound of rain. But it's not water. It's a shower of earth, stones, and small pieces of shrapnel pattering down on the roof of your shelter. This is followed by a much more terrifying sound, the high-pitched, musical tinkle of shattering glass from every window in your house and probably every house on your street, a delicate, crystalline sound in the midst of brutal destruction. And then, the lowest sound of all, a deep, grinding, groaning roar. It's the sound of a nearby house, its structure fatally compromised by the blast, slowly giving up the ghost and collapsing into a pile of rubble. This is a good moment to bring up a peculiar piece of physics that became a grim piece of folk wisdom during the Blitz. If you heard the whistle of the bomb, it meant you were safe from that particular one. The reasoning was brutally simple. If it was going to land directly on you, it would be traveling faster than the speed of sound. You would never hear it coming. This bit of knowledge was a strange, cold comfort. Something people would mutter to each other in the shelters. Heard that one, so we're all right. After the initial shock of the nearby blast passes, a new, more immediate fear sets in. You're trapped in the pitch black, ringing darkness of your shelter. The exit might be blocked by debris. The house just a few yards away might be on fire. You fumble for the matches, your hands shaking uncontrollably. Someone finally manages to relight the candle. In the wavering, pathetic light, you look at each other's faces. They are pale, wide-eyed, and covered in a fine layer of dust. Historians and scientists still study the long-term effects of this experience. The constant exposure to high decibel, low-frequency noise and the visceral shock of blast waves can have profound, lasting physiological and psychological effects, a condition we now might call a form of complex PTSD, but back then, it was just called being a bit shaken up. The expectation was to dust yourself off and carry on. You take a few deep, shuddering breaths. The air tastes of cordotan dust. The drone of the planes, which had been momentarily silenced, begins to filter back into your consciousness. It hasn't stopped. The raid isn't over. This was just one bomb. There are hundreds more up there. Use it in the flickering candlelight, your ears still ringing, and you wait for the next whistle to begin. Sooner or later, you have to leave the shelter. Maybe the all clear has sounded, or maybe you just can't bear the cramped, damp conditions any longer. Or perhaps, most pressingly, you need to use a real toilet. You push open the heavy door of your Anderson shelter, or creep up the cellar steps, and step out into the night. You step into a world of absolute, impenetrable darkness. Welcome to the blackout. Navigating London during the blackout is not just an inconvenience, it's a life-threatening challenge. Before the war, this city was a river of light, street lamps, glowing shop windows, theater marquees, the headlights of cars, they all combined to create a familiar, comforting nocturnal landscape. Now, all of that is gone, by law, and the darkness is total. You decide to walk to the end of your street, perhaps to check on a neighbor, or just to see if the local pub has dared to open its doors. The moment you step away from your own doorway, you are untethered. You stretch out your hands, like a blind person, feeling for the familiar texture of a brick wall or a garden fence. Your feet shuffle, testing the ground ahead before you commit your full weight. Every step is a minor act of faith. The air itself feels different. It's thick with the smell of coal smoke, dampness, and the ever-present, acrid taint of recent explosions. Your other senses become heightened. You can hear the distant, muffled footsteps of another person, and you both freeze, listening, trying to avoid a clumsy collision in the dark. A whispered sorry made is exchanged as you pass like ghosts. This is where you learn about the unexpected dangers of your own city. A curb you've stepped off 1,000 times without thinking now becomes a treacherous cliff. A lamppost, its light extinguished, becomes a solid obstacle to walk painfully into. And then there are the new dangers. The bomb craters. A street that was perfectly flat yesterday might now have a 10-foot deep hole in the middle of it, invisible in the gloom. The newspapers are full of grim stories of people who simply walked into a crater in the dark. And let's add another layer of peril to traffic. The few vehicles that are allowed to move at night: ambulances, fire engines. Military trucks do so with heavily masked headlights that cast only a tiny, dim slit of light onto the road immediately in front of them. They are terrifyingly quiet until they are almost on top of you. You learn to listen for the crunch of tires on gravel or the low grumble of an engine as your primary warning system. Here's a bizarre little piece of trivia about the blackout. It caused a minor fashion boom for white accessories. Women started wearing white scarves, gloves, or even painting a stripe down the back of their stockings, all in a desperate attempt to be more visible. The government even ran campaigns encouraging people to be a cat's eye in the blackout, promoting walking sticks with white painted tips. It was a strange intersection of mortal peril and sartorial choice. The psychological effect of this perpetual darkness is a topic historians still explore. It was profoundly isolating. It bred a sense of paranoia and unease. The familiar city became an alien landscape. Crime rates, particularly muggings and petty theft, saw a spike in some areas as the darkness provided perfect cover. But paradoxically, it also fostered a strange, new kind of intimacy. Strangers would help each other, calling out warnings about obstacles, their voices disembodied in the pitch black. Mind the step, or crater on your left, became common courtesies. As you shuffle along your street, you see a sliver of light coming from a neighbor's window. It's a tiny crack in their blackout curtain, but in this total darkness, it shines like a beacon. Before you can even register it, you hear an angry, urgent shout from the gloom. Put that light out. It's the voice of your local ARP warden, the guardian of the darkness. Any light, no matter how small, could theoretically provide a target for a bomber. The collective safety depends on absolute, shared darkness. The light is extinguished with a guilty speed. You finally reach the end of the street. You've made it. It's a journey of maybe 100 yards, but it feels like you've crossed a treacherous mountain pass. You stand there for a moment, listening to the city. It's not silent. There's the distant wail of a siren from another borough, the rumble of a fire engine, and the constant high-altitude drone of the planes that are still up there. The darkness is not empty, it's full of hidden threats, and you have to walk all the way back. As you stand there in the suffocating darkness, paralyzed by the simple act of trying to cross the street, you hear that angry, disembodied voice again. But this time it's closer, and it's not shouting at a sliver of light. It's shouting at you. You there! Get off the street, take cover. A figure emerges from the gloom, a dark shape made slightly more substantial by a tin helmet on his head. This is your introduction to the local air raid precautions warden, the ARP warden. He is the shepherd of your terrified flock. These wardens are your neighbors. The man shining a dim, shielded torch in your face might be Mr. Higgins, the grocer from down the road, or Mr. Davies, the mild-mannered librarian you see every Saturday. By day, they are ordinary civilians, but by night, they put on a helmet and an armband and become figures of immense authority. They are the front line of civil defense, an army of volunteers tasked with an impossible job. Your local warden, let's call him Arthur, probably has a designated post, a small sandbagged kiosk or reinforced cellar, which serves as his base of operations. From here, he patrols a specific number of streets, his patch of London to protect. His job is a checklist of horrors. He has to enforce the blackout, shouting at people like you to put that light out. He has to sound his hand, crank, treadle, or whistle to warn of a gas attack, a threat that, mercifully, never materializes on a large scale. He has to guide panicked people to the nearest public shelter, his voice a beacon of calm in the chaos. And after the bombs have fallen, his real work begins. He is the first responder. While you are huddled in your shelter, listening to the destruction, Arthur is out in it. H.E.S., the one who runs towards the site of a fresh explosion, his small torch beam cutting a pathetics or through the dust-choked air. He has to assess the damage, report the location of fire brigade, and call for ambulances. Most terribly, He is often the first to start digging through the rubble for survivors. Armed with little more than a shovel in his bare hands, he listens for faint cries from beneath the wreckage of a collapsed house. He is a rescuer, a firefighter, and a paramedic, all rolled into one, with minimal training and even less equipment. Here's a small but poignant detail about the ARP wardens. Their equipment was rudimentary at best. They had their steel helmet, a gas mask, a whistle, and perhaps a small first aid kit. Their most important tool was their local knowledge. Arthur knows this neighborhood like the back of his hand. He knows who lives in which house, how many children they have, and who the elderly or infirm residents are. He knows that Mrs. Gable in number 23 is deafened, won't have heard the siren, and he'll have banged on her door until she was safely in her cellar. This intimate, street-level knowledge saved countless lives. Of course, the public's relationship with the wardens was complicated, a fact that personal diaries and oral histories make very clear. On the one hand, they were heroes, admired for their incredible bravery. On the other hand, they could be seen as petty tyrants, officious busboys who took a little too much pleasure in shouting at people about their blackout curtains. Historians still debate the social dynamics at play. Were they a symbol of community solidarity, or did their newfound power sometimes create resentment? The truth, as is often the case, is that they were both. They were ordinary people placed in an extraordinary situation, and they reacted with the full, messy spectrum of human behavior. Tonight, Arthur is in a hurry. There's an unexploded bomb down the end of the road, he tells you, his voice slow and urgent. They're evacuating the houses on this side. You need to get to the public shelter at the school. Now, go on. Get a move on. He doesn't wait for your reply. HES already moving off into the darkness, his torchbeam bobbing away towards the next house. You are left with his stark warning hanging in the air. You now have a new problem. Your own home, your own shelter, is no longer safe. You have to venture out into the blacked out, bomb-strewn streets and find your way to a place. You've only heard about the public shelter. Arthur, your grumpy, heroic, local warden has just saved your life and ruined your night in equal measure. Following the warden's urgent instructions, you now have a new destination, the local public shelter. In your case, it's the reinforced basement of the nearby primary school. Or perhaps it's a series of brick-lined trenches dug into the public square. Or, if you're lucky enough to live near one, a London Underground station. Whatever its form, it represents a different kind of survival experience. You leave the semi-privacy of your Anderson shelter and plunge into the world of communal sheltering. You arrive at the entrance, a dark maw in the side of the school building, and are immediately hit by a wall of sound and smell. The air is thick, warm, and humid, a cocktail of unwashed bodies, stale tea, disinfectant, and fear. It's incredibly crowded. Hundreds of people are crammed into a space that was never designed for them. You have to squeeze pamped out on mattresses, old men playing checkers on a wooden crate, and a woman trying to soothe a crying baby, low-leveled in coughing, muttering the baby's wails, and a crackly radio in the corner playing tinny dance music, a surreal counterpoint to the muffled thud of the bombs falling outside. You find a small patch of concrete floor to call your own, huddling with your family and the few possessions you manage to grab. This is your home for the night. There is no privacy here. Your fear, your exhaustion, your quiet conversations, they are all public property. You are surrounded by the raw, unfiltered humanity of your neighborhood. This is the reality of the so-called Blitz Spirit. It wasn't just about defiant songs and cheerful stoicism. It was about learning to live cheek by jowl with your neighbors in the most stressful conditions imaginable. It was about sharing your flask of tea with a complete stranger and learning to ignore the sound of the man next to you snoring loudly while the world is seemingly ending outside. And here's a quirky detail about life in the public shelters: the rise of the shelter boss. In many of the larger shelters, an unofficial leader would emerge. This person, often a formidable, no-nonsense woman, would take it upon themselves to organize things. They would create rotas for cleaning the latrines, break up arguments over space, and ensure that the children were kept quiet. They were the unelected, undisputed queens of the underworld, and their rule was absolute. Their existence is a fascinating example of social structures forming spontaneously under extreme pressure. However, the safety of these public shelters is a matter of intense historical debate. While they offered protection from shrapnel and collapsing buildings, some were tragically vulnerable to direct hits. There were several catastrophic incidents where large public shelters were hit, leading to immense loss of life. One of the most infamous was at Balham Underground Station, where a bomb pierced the ground above the platform, burst a water main, and caused a torrent of water, sand, and sludge to cascade down onto the people sheltering below. The official story was suppressed at the time to avoid damaging morale, but the reality was horrific. So as you sit there on the cold concrete floor, you are playing a grim game of chance. You have traded the relative isolation of your Anderson shelter for the perceived strength and numbers of the public one. Is it safer? No one really knows. You look around at the faces in the dim light. The young couple holding hands, their faces a mask of anxiety. The elderly woman asleep in a deck chair, her mouth slightly open. The small boy quietly playing with a toy soldier. Each one is a story. Each one is a life hanging in the balance. The best public shelters, by far, were the deep level tip stations. Places like the Aldwych Station, no longer in public use, were converted into massive, purpose-built shelters. They were drier, safer, and better organized than the school basements. People would queue for hours in the afternoon to get a good spot on the platform, setting up makeshift beds and creating entire subterranean communities. They even had libraries, canteens, and concerts down there, humming with life, deep beneath the burning one. But your local school basement has none of these luxuries. It just has concrete dampness, and the reassuring, if claustrophobic, presence of other scared human beings. And for tonight, that will have to be enough. As you sit in the stuffy, crowded public shelter, your senses adapt to this new environment. You are no longer just reacting to the noise, you are starting to analyze it. You are, out of sheer necessity, becoming a connoisseur of chaos. The sounds of the Blitz are not a monolithic roar, they are a symphony of different, distinct, and terrifying instruments. Learning to tell them apart becomes a crucial, if morbid, survival skill. First, there's the overture, the air raid siren. You now know its voice intimately. The initial warning is the rising and falling wail, the sound that sends you scrambling. It's a sound designed by acoustical engineers to be as alarming as possible, to cut through the noise of the city and trigger a primal fear response. It works. Then, much later, hopefully, you'll hear the all-clear steady, continuous note that is the most beautiful sound in the world. Next in the orchestra are the strings, represented by the high-altitude drone of the bomber engines. We've talked about this sound, the constant, throbbing WUUMWU, MWUM UUM that provides the bass line for the entire piece. It's the sound of suspense, the atmosphere of dread that hangs over everything. Then come the woodwinds, the whistle of the falling bombs. This is the solo performance, the piercing shriek that demands your full attention. You learn to judge its pitch and duration. A short, high-pitched whistle might be a small incendiary bomb. A long, drawn-out, freight train roar is a big one, a high-explosive blockbuster. You learn that if the whistle seems to fade, the bomb is moving away from you. If it gets steadily louder, you hold your breath. The percussion section is, of course, the most dramatic. This is the work of the explosions themselves. You start to differentiate between them. There's the deep, resonant CRUMP of a high explosive bomb, the one that shakes the ground and rattles your teeth. Then there's the much sharper, almost cracking sound of a smaller bomb, followed by the clatter of debris. And then there are the incendiarious, They don't explode with a boom, they land with a dull thud, followed by a fierce, instantaneous WA-CHOOSH as they ignite, a sound like a giant gas burner being turned on. But you're not the only one making noise. Your side has its own instruments. This is the brass section, the anti-aircraft guns, or ACAC guns as they're affectionately known. The ones in the local park fire with a sharp, barking crack that is noticeably different from a bomb's explosion. It's a strangely comforting sound. It's the sound of someone fighting back. You can hear the shells rushing up into the sky, and then, moments later, you hear them bursting high up in the clouds with a muffled pop, like cosmic champagne corks. This brings us to a rather sad and debated point among military historians. The effectiveness of London's anti-aircraft defense, especially in the early stages of the Blitz, was limited. The guns made a terrific noise and were a huge boost to morale. The public loved to see them in action, but they brought down very few enemy aircraft. Their shells were oft unfused to explode at the wrong altitude, and hitting a moving target at 12,000 feet in the dark was next to impossible. Their primary role was to force the bombers to fly higher and to make their bombing runs less accurate, a form of aerial harassment rather than a truly deadly defense. A strange and specific sound that many survivors remember is the Mini. This was the nickname for the German parachute mines. These were huge, powerful explosives that were dropped on parachutes to slow their descent and increase the lateral blast effect. They didn't whistle. They were silent, but the parachute made a soft, rustling sound as it came down. In a lull in the bombing, to hear a soft, whispery rustle from the sky was one of the most terrifying sounds of all, because you knew what was coming at the end of it. You sit there, in the shelter, listening. You've become a reluctant audience member at the world's most terrifying concert. You can now tell, with a grim and growing expertise, the difference between a Heinkel and a Junkers bomber by the rhythm of their engines. You can distinguish between outgoing and incoming fire. You can estimate the size of a bomb by the sound of its explosion. This is not knowledge you ever wanted, but it is knowledge you ever wanted. But it is knowledge that is being forced upon you, night after night. You are learning the language of destruction. As the night wears on, the symphony of destruction changes its tune. The percussive booms of the high explosive bombs become less frequent, replaced by a new, more insidious sound. It begins as thousands of soft, rustling thuds, like a sudden, heavy hailstorm hitting the rooftops all over the city. But this is not rain. This is a shower of fire. The Germans have started dropping incendiary bombs. These are not designed to obliterate buildings with a single blast. Their purpose is far more sinister: to start an overwhelming number of small fires simultaneously, with the goal of creating a firestorm that will consume entire districts. You are witnessing the birth of a new kind of hell. The most common type is the electron thermite incendiary. It's a deceptively simple little device, a small magnesium tube filled with thermite, weighing only about 2 kilograms. It's not the impact that's dangerous, but what happens next. A moment after it lands, it ignites with a blindingly brilliant white-hot flare, burning at a temperature of over 2,000 degrees Celsius. It can burn straight through a rooftop, a ceiling, and a floor, starting fires on multiple levels of a house at once. From the relative safety of your shelter, you become aware of this new phase of the attack through your other senses. You can smell it first. The thick, choking smoke starts to seep into your underground sanctuary. It's a different smell from the sharp, chemical tang of high explosives. This is the smell of a city burning wood, fabric, plaster, and something else, something acrid and metallic from the bombs themselves. Then you become aware of a new light. A flickering, orange glow begins to illuminate the entrance to the shelter. It dances and wavers, casting moving shadows inside. It's the reflection of the fires outside, growing in intensity. It's a terrifyingly beautiful sight, like a sunset happening at midnight, in every direction at once. The world outside your concrete haven is on fire. This is where the heroes of the auxiliary fires serve a CFS come in. Like the ARP wardens, these are ordinary civilians, taxi drivers, shopkeepers, office workers who have volunteered to fight the fires. They race through the blazing streets in their little reed fire tenders, facing a task of unimaginable scale. They are trying to fight a hydra-headed monster. For every fire they manage to extinguish with a jet of precious water, 10 more spring up around them. Here's a fascinating, ungrim piece of trivia about the firefighting effort. One of the biggest problems the AFS faced was not a lack of courage, but a lack of water. The sheer force of the high explosive bombs that were dropped alongside the incendiaries would frequently rupture the water mains underground. Firefighters would arrive at a burning building, connect their hoses to the hydrant, and get nothing but a pathetic trickle. They often had to resort to pumping water directly from the Thames, laying thousands of feet of hose through the burning, rubble-strewn streets. The night of December 29th, 1940, became known as the Second Great Fire of London. On this night, the Luftwaffe dropped an unprecedented number of incendiaries on the historic heart of the city. The area around St. Paul's Cathedral was engulfed in a sea of flames. The iconic dome, silhouetted against a wall of fire, became one of the most enduring images of the Blitz. The survival of the cathedral itself is a story of incredible bravery, involving a dedicated team of volunteer fire watchers, the St. Paul's Watch, who scurried across the cathedral's vast roof, prizing burning incendiaries off with shovels and sandbags before they could burn through the lead. The academic debate here focuses on the strategic thinking behind this firebombing. Was it a more efficient way to destroy a city's infrastructure than high explosives, or was it primarily a weapon of terror, designed to create a spectacle of destruction so vast and horrifying that it would break the will of the people? When you see that hellish orange glow painting the sky, you feel the answer is likely a horrifying combination of both. The raid finally ends. The drone of the planes fades away. The explosions stop. But the sounds of the night are not over. Now you hear the crackle and roar of the flames, the crash of collapsing, burned-out buildings, and the frantic ringing of fire engine bells. The immediate threat from the sky has passed, but the city is now fighting a new battle against itself on the ground. And the acrid smoke continues to pour into your shelter, a thick, choking reminder that even when the bombs stop, the danger is far from over. The final, beautiful note of the all-clear siren echoes through the dawn air. It's a sound of pure, unadulterated relief. The raid is over. You have survived another night. A collective, weary sigh. Slowly, stiffly, people begin to gather their belongings, their faces pale and smudged with dirt in the first gray light of morning. You join the steps out of the stuffy basement and back into the world. You step outside, and for a moment, you are blinded. Not by sunlight, but by smoke. The air is thick and heavy, a yellow-gray fog that stings your eyes and catches in the back of your throat. It carries the smell of damp, burnt-out embers, a smell that will become the signature perfume of your city for years to come. As your eyes adjust, you take in the scene. The world has been redecorated in shades of gray. A thick layer of fine dust and soot covers everything: the streets, the cars, the trees, like a morbid, gritty snowfall. The silence is the most unsettling part. After a night filled with overwhelming noise, the quiet feels unnatural, eerie. It's not a peaceful silence, it's the silence, it's the silence, it's the silence, it's the silence of exhaustion, of shock. The only sounds are the distant clang of a fire bell, the crunch of broken glass under your own feet, and the soft, mournful whisper of the wind blowing through the skeletal, windowless frames of nearby buildings. This is the morning after. This is the part of the Blitz that is often forgotten in the dramatic retelling of the bombing itself. It's the slow, grim, daily reality of waking up to a world that is a little more broken than it was the day before. You begin the walk home, a journey through a landscape that is both familiar and terrifyingly alien. Your street is still there, but it's scarred and wounded. The road is littered with debris, broken slates from rooftops, chunks of plaster, and a shimmering carpet of shattered glass that crunches with every step. You have to navigate around a new obstacle, a huge pile of bricks and splintered wood that was, just yesterday, your neighbor's garden wall. A small but poignant detail that many survivors remember is the surreal sight of everyday objects in the midst of the destruction. A child's teddy bear lying in a pile of rubble. A single, unbroken teacup sitting pristine on a shattered windowsill. A photograph, miraculously unharmed, lying face up on a mountain of plaster. These small, domestic tragedies are often more heartbreaking than the grand scale of the destruction. They are tangible links to the lives that have been violently disrupted. As you get closer to your own house, your heart rate quickens. It's a moment of pure dread that every Londoner experiences every morning. Is it still there? You turn the corner, your eyes scanning for the familiar shape of your roof, your front door. The relief you feel when you see it, still standing, is a physical sensation, a wave of warmth that washes over you, so intense it almost makes your knees buckle. It may have no windows, and there might be a new crack in the wall. But it's there. You are one of the lucky ones today. The question of how Londoners coped with this daily, grinding psychological stress is something historians and psychologists continue to study. Was it the famous Blitz Spirit, a collective sense of defiance and community, or was it something closer to a city-wide state of shock, a numbing of the senses that allowed people to function? The answer is complex. Diaries from the period reveal both incredible acts of kindness and moments of profound despair, sometimes on the same page. It was not one or the other, it was a constant, the exhausting oscillation between the two. You see a group of your neighbors gathered further down the street. They are standing in silence, looking at a huge pile of rubble where a house used to be. You know who lived there. The Smiths. You were just chatting with Mrs. Smith over the garden fence 2 days ago. The ARP warden is there, talking quietly to a policeman. There are no frantic rescue efforts. There are no cries for help. There is just a grim, quiet finality. You don't need to ask. You just know. You feel a pang of survivor's guilt, sharp and unwelcome. Why them and not you? It's a question that has no answer. A question that will haunt you. You turn away, unable to look any longer, and face your own damaged front door. The day has just begun. You stand before your house. It's still standing, a victory in itself. But it's wounded. Every single pane of glass in the windows is gone, leaving black, gaping holes. The front door hangs crookedly on one hinge. Your prize-winning roses are buried under a layer of soot and plaster dust. You step inside, your feet crunching on the glass that carpets the hallway floor. The blast wave from that nearby bomb didn't just break the windows, it invaded your home. The inside is chaos. Pictures have been thrown from the walls. Books have been flung from their shelves, and a fine layer of grey dust covers every surface, a miniature Pompeii. The living room curtains, which your mother was so proud of, are shredded, hanging in tattered ribbons. It's a violation. The safety and sanctity of your home has been breached. You start the slow, weary process of cleaning up. You sweep up the glass, you try to straighten the furniture, you dust off a precious photograph. This becomes a daily ritual for thousands of Londoners. The act of putting your home back in order, however temporarily, is a small act of defiance. It's you saying to the bombers, you can knock it down, but we will sweep it up. You will not defeat us with dust and broken glass. As you're reworking, you hear a commotion outside. You look out of the empty window frame and see your neighbors, the Patels, standing in front of what's left of their house. It took a much worse hit than yours. Half of the roof is gone, and the front wall is a spitter bare of terrifying cracks. They are staring at it, their faces a mixture of shock and despair. But they are not alone. Mr. Henderson from 2 doors down, a man you've only ever exchanged polite nods with, is already there with a ladder, helping them retrieve a few salvageable items from an upstairs bedroom. Mrs. Higgins, the warden's wife, arrives with a flask of hot, sweet tea and a plate of biscuits. Someone else is helping them cover the gaping hole in their roof with a tarpaulin. This is the Blitz Spirit in action. It's not about singing songs in the face of danger. It's this. It's the quiet, practical, unshowy business of helping your neighbor. It's the unspoken understanding that you are all in this together. The bomb that hit the Patel S house could just as easily have hit yours. Next week, it might be you standing in the rubble, and it will be their turn to bring the tea. But this brings us to a more complex and less comfortable aspect of the Blitz, one that historians are still carefully unpacking through oral histories and personal accounts. While this spirit of mutual support was very real, the relentless pressure also brought out the worst in some people. In the immediate aftermath of a bombing, with chaos reigning and no police in sight, looting was a significant problem. Ghoulish opportunists would pick through the ruins of bombed outhouses, stealing whatever they could find: jewelry, money, even food from the larder. It was a grim underside to the heroic narrative, a reminder that in times of crisis, human behavior runs the full gamut from saintly to predatory. The government heavily censored reports of looting taint the image of a unified, stoic populace. A particularly strange and grim job that emerged during this time was that of the furniture remover. When a street was evacuated due to an unexploded bomb, or a house was declared unsafe, these teams would go in to retrieve the family's possessions. They worked under incredible pressure, often with the threat of a collapsing building or a sudden explosion hanging over them, saving the precious, mundane objects that made up a life. You watch your neighbors for a while. The small acts of kindness are a powerful antidote to the despair you felt just moments ago. It gives you the strength to go back to your own cleanup. Later in the day, Mr. Patel, despite having lost half his roof, comes over to help you nail a piece of cardboard over your largest broken window. You don't have to ask, he just does it. You end the day exhausted, your body aching from the cleanup. Your house is still a wreck, but it's a more orderly wreck. The glass is gone, the furniture is upright. You've created a small pocket of order in a world of chaos. As you sit down with a cup of tea in your dusty, windowless living room, you look at the cardboard patch on your window. It's ugly, it's temporary, and it's a testament to the fact that while a bomb can destroy a house in a second, it takes more than that to destroy a neighborhood. The morning after a bad raid, after you've assessed the damage to your home and your street, a new sound begins to drift through the city. It's the cheerful, clattering rumble of a van navigating the debris-strewn roads. From its side, steam billows into the cold morning air. This is the arrival of the mobile canteen, and it is, without exaggeration, the arrival of salvation in a cup. These vans, often run by organizations like the Women's Voluntary Service WVS or the Salvation Army, would doctor into the most heavily bombed areas. They would set up on a street corner, surrounded by wreckage, and begin serving hot drinks and simple food to anyone who needed it. The rescue workers who had been digging through rubble all night, the firefighters black with soot and exhaustion, and the dazed, homeless survivors who had lost everything. You wander over, drawn by the smell of hot tea and the promise of a small human connection. You join the queue of shell-shocked residents and weary ARP wardens. The women serving from the van are brisk, cheerful, and endlessly compassionate. They have a smile and a kind word for everyone. There you are, love. A nice hot cuppa will see you right. You're handed a thick, white ceramic mug filled with steaming, dark brown liquid. It is, objectively speaking, probably not very good tea. It's likely brewed in a giant urn, strong enough to dissolve a spoon, and sweetened with a heap of sugar and a splash of condensed milk. But in this moment, it is the most delicious thing you have ever tasted. The warmth of the mug seeps into your cold, trembling hands. The hot, sweet liquid slides down your throat, a small, comforting anchor in a world that has come unmoored. This cup of tea is more than just a drink. It's a ritual. It's a ritual. It's a moment of normality in the midst of madness. It's a symbol that, Despite the chaos and destruction, the basic decencies of life persist. Standing there, sipping your tea, you are no longer just a victim. You are part of a community, sharing a small, defiant moment of respite. Here's a little known fact that highlights the importance of these canteens. They were considered so vital to public morale that they were often given priority access to ration goods like tea, sugar, and milk. The government understood that the psychological impact of that cup of tea was as important as any military defense. It was a weapon in the war against despair. You look around at the other people in the queue. You see the rescue squad workers, their faces gray with dust and fatigue, gratefully accepting a mug and a sandwich. You see a family whose house is now a pile of bricks, the parents trying to comfort their children with a biscuit. The mobile canteen is a temporary village green, a focal point where the community can gather, share stories of survival, and draw strength from each other. The role of women in the war effort is a vast and complex topic, and historians continue to emphasize how crucial their contributions were, far beyond the traditional narratives. The women of the WVS, in their smart green uniforms, were a ubiquitous and essential part of the home front. They didn't just serve tea. They ran rest centers for the homeless. They collected scrap metal for the war effort. They knitted socks for soldiers, and they looked after the children of mothers who were working in factories. They were the glue that held the fabric of civilian society together. But, as with everything in the Blitz, there's a debate. Some contemporary accounts and later feminist critiques have questioned whether this focus on women's work providing comfort, making tea reinforce traditional gender roles, even in a time of crisis. Did it celebrate women's resilience, or did it confine them to a domestic, supportive role while the men were seen as the active heroes? It's a nuanced discussion. Looking at the exhausted face of the woman serving you, who has probably been up all night herself, you don't see a stereotype. You see a warrior armed with a teapot. You finish your tea and hand the mug back. You feel marginally more human. The warmth has spread through your body, and the sugar has given you a small burst of energy. The problems are all still there. Your house is still damaged. Your neighbors are still homeless, and the bombers will almost certainly be back tonight. But for a few precious minutes, the cup of tea gave you a moment of peace. It was a small, warm, defiant act against the cold reality of war. Standing in the queue for tea, sharing stories of the night's destruction, you are participating in what has become the legendary Blitz Spirit. It's a powerful idea, one that will be promoted in government propaganda, celebrated in newspapers, and will echo down through the decades as a defining feature of British national character. It's the spirit of resilience, of good humor in the face of adversity, of communities pulling together, and of the defiant stiff upper lip. And as you look around at your neighbors helping each other, it feels undeniably real. You see it in the cheeky, hand-painted signs that start appearing on the front of bombed-out shops. A tailor's shop, its front window blown out, might have a sign saying, "More open than usual." A pub with no roof might proclaim, "Come in, our spirits aren't watered, even if our beer is." This gallows humor is a potent defense mechanism, a way of laughing in the face of terror, of reducing the enemy's mighty air force to the butt of a joke. It's a way of seizing back a tiny bit of control in a situation where you are otherwise helpless. You hear it in the songs people sing in the public shelters. Tunes like "Roll Out the Barrel," or the impossibly cheerful word on a "Hang Out the Washing" on the Siegfried line are belted out. A noisy act of communal defiance against the drone of the planes overhead. It's a way of creating your own sound, of refusing to be silenced by the enemy's symphony of destruction. But now we have to ask a more difficult question, one that historians and sociologists have been wrestling with ever since. How real was the Blitz spirit? Was it a genuine, universal phenomenon, or was it a carefully constructed myth, a piece of brilliant propaganda that papered over a much more complex and messy reality? The truth, as you can see if you look closely, is somewhere in the middle. The spirit of community and defiance was absolutely real. You've witnessed it yourself. But it was the whole story. The relentless, nightly bombing took a terrible psychological toll that the cheerful narrative often ignores. For every person singing in a shelter, there was another person quietly weeping in a corner, their nerves completely shattered. This is where we find the less celebrated stories. The government-run rest centers were overwhelmed not just with people who had lost their homes, but with people suffering from what was then vaguely termed bomb neurosis or shelter shock, what we would now recognize as acute anxiety, depression, and PTSD. These people were often seen as a problem, as letting the side down. Their suffering didn't fit the heroic narrative. Here's a small, telling detail: the government became very concerned about the spread of defeatist talk. Mass Observation, a pioneering social research organization, sent undercover observers into pubs, queues, and shelters to listen to what ordinary people were really saying. Their reports, which were kept secret at the time, paint a much more nuanced picture than the newspapers. They recorded incredible bravery and determination, but also deep war, weariness, anger at the government's perceived failings, and a desperate longing for the bombing to just stop, no matter the cost. So, the Blitz Spirit is best understood not as a constant, universal state, but as something that people moved in and out of. You might feel defiant and cheerful one morning after a cup of tea from the WVS, and then feel utterly hopeless and terrified that same evening as the sirens wail again. Both feelings were valid, and both were part of the genuine Blitz experience. The academic debate on this is fascinating. Some historians argue that the myth of the Blitz Spirit was so powerful that it became a self-fulfilling prophecy, encouraging people to act in the brave and stoic manner that was expected of them. Others argue that the myth did a great disservice to the thousands who suffered silently, creating a culture where it was difficult to admit you weren't coping. As you walk away from the mobile canteen, you feel a surge of that very spirit. You feel proud of your neighbors, of your city. You feel a grim determination to see it through. But as you pass the rubble of the Smith's house, a cold knot of fear tightens in your stomach. The cheerful defiance is real. The terror is also real. They exist side by side, a paradox you have to live with every single day. The Blitz Spirit isn't a comfortable lie, it's a complicated, exhausting truth. The war against the bombers is fought at night, in the shelters and on the streets. But there is another war, a quieter, more relentless one, that is fought during the day. It is fought in queues, in kitchens, and at the dinner table. This is the war of rationing. After the immediate cleanup of the morning's debris, the reality of daily life sets in. You need to eat, but you can't just pop to the shops and buy what you fancy. Your life is now governed by a small, precious, and incredibly frustrating document, your ration book. It's a little booklet filled with grids of tiny coupons, each one a ticket to a small piece of survival. Losing it is a catastrophe on par with your house being bombed. You take your string bag and your ration book and head to the high street. The first thing you notice is the queues. There are queues for everything. You queue at the butcher. You queue at the grocer. You queue as the new social club of London, a place for gossip, for sharing news, and for a particular kind of quiet, shared anxiety. The worst fear is getting to the front of the line only to see the dreaded, hand-written signs sold out. Let's go to the butcher first. You hand over your ration book. The butcher, a man who knows every honest business, takes his scissors and carefully snips out a coupon. In return, you are allocated your weekly meat ration. It is a shockingly small amount of mince or a few sausages, barely enough for 1 or 2 proper family meals. The rest of the week will be a challenge of culinary invention. Then it's on to the grocer for your other staples. Your ration book gets you a tiny knob of butter or margarine, a small bag of sugar, a few ounces of cheese, and of course tea. Everything is measured in ounces. Your world has shrunk to a scale of tiny, precious quantities. An egg is a treasure. When your turn for a fresh egg comes up, you carry it home as if it were the crown jewels. This is where you encounter the Ministry of Food's attempts to keep the nation fed and healthy. The most infamous of these is the Walton Pie, named after the Minister of Food, Lord Walton. He promoted it as a patriotic, nutritious, and delicious meal. It was two of those things. The recipe consisted of whatever vegetables were currently in season: potatoes, cauliflower, carrots, turnips diced, boiled, and baked in a potato or wholemeal pastry crust with a thick vegetable gravy. You've probably made one. It tastes of boiled vegetables and grim determination. Eating it feels like a genuine sacrifice for the war effort. And here's a wonderfully grim detailed bread. To save shipping space, the government decreed that flour should not be as finely milled. The result was the national loaf. It was a grayish-brown, dense, and slightly coarse loaf of bread that became the standard for the entire country. It was fortified with calcium and vitamins and was undoubtedly nutritious, but it lacked the soft, white fluffiness of pre-war bread. People complained it gave them indigestion, but they ate it. It filled a hole, which was its primary virtue. The academic debate about rationing is fascinating because it's so counterintuitive. On one hand, the British diet became incredibly monotonous, bland, and joyless. But on the other hand, many historians and nutritionists argue that the health of the nation, particularly among the poorest classes, actually improved during the war. For the first time, everyone had access to a balanced, if basic, diet. The forced reduction in sugar, fat, and meat, combined with an increase in vegetables thanks to the Dig for Victory campaign that has turned your flour into a carrot patch, led to a decrease in some diet-related illnesses. Was rationing a culinary nightmare, but a public health triumph? The debate continues, weighing the physical benefits against the psychological grind of a joyless diet. Of course, there was a way around it, if you had the money and were willing to bend the rules. The black market. You'd hear whispers of a butcher who could get you some extra sausages off the books, or a man in a pub who could sell you real coffee instead of the official offering made from roasted acorns. These shadowy figures, known as SPI verses, with their wide-brimmed hats and slicked-back hair, were a source of both temptation and resentment. They were a reminder that even in a nation supposedly united in sacrifice, inequality always finds a way. You get home, your string bag half empty but your ration book significantly lighter. You look at your meager haul. This is what you have to work with. The nightly terror of the Blitz is a trial of courage. This daily struggle for sustenance is a trial of ingenuity and endurance. And in its own quiet way, it is just as much a part of the war. After a meager dinner cobbled together from your rations, you and your family gather in the living room. It's dark outside, and the blackout curtains are drawn tight. You don't have the television to distract you, of course. The main source of news, entertainment, and most importantly, morale, is the wireless. Tonight, there's a special broadcast. The Prime Minister is scheduled to speak. You all lean in close to the handsome wooden cabinet as it warms up, the familiar hum and crackle filling the room. The BBC announcer, with his perfect, clipped, reassuring vowels, introduces the speaker. And then that voice fills your home. A voice that is utterly unique and unmistakable. It's the deep, gravelly, defiant growl of Winston Churchill. Listening to Churchill on the radio is a national ritual. His voice is not traditionally beautiful or smooth. It has a slight lisp, a deliberate, almost ponderous rhythm, and a tendency to sound like a bulldog chewing on a cigar. But it is, in this moment, the most powerful weapon Britain possesses. He doesn't sugarcoat the situation. He speaks of the grievous ordeal you are facing, of blood, tears, and sweat. He doesn't make false promises of a quick victory. And yet, his words are electrifying. He uses language like a master painter, crafting phrases that are both grand and deeply personal. He speaks of the long and hard winter that lies ahead, but he also speaks of the sunlit uplands, that await on the other side of victory. Tonight he might be talking about the air war. You listen as he praises the boys of the Royal Air Force, the few to whom so many owe so much. Even though he is talking about the pilots fighting miles above your head, you feel as though he is talking directly to you. He is framing your suffering, your fear, your nightly ordeal in the shelter as part of this grand, heroic struggle. You are not just a passive victim cowering in a hole, you are a soldier on the front line of the Battle of Britain, a steadfast guardian of civilization itself. This is the genius of Churchill's wartime oratory. He made the stakes clear. You weren't just fighting for Britain, you were fighting for the survival of freedom in the world. He had an incredible ability to make a grocer from Illingston or a docker from the East End feel like they were standing shoulder to shoulder with the heroes of old. Here's a small, fascinating detail about these famous speeches. Many of them were not delivered live to the nation in the heat of the moment. For security on technical reasons, Churchill would often deliver a speech to the House of Commons in the afternoon, and then go to a small, secret studio in the basements of Broadcasting House, where the cabinet wore rooms late at night to record it for the BBC broadcast. So, when you're listening to that passionate, defiant oration, HES often speaking into a single microphone, in a quiet room, sometimes with only a single technician present, it's a testament to his incredible power as a performer. Of course, the historical assessment of Churchill is complex and full of debate. He was a controversial figure before the war and would become one again after it. Historians still argue about his strategic decisions, his social views, and his political legacy. Was he the savior of the nation, a peerless war leader who single-handedly rallied the nation, or was he a brilliant but flawed figure who happened to be the right man in the right place at the right time? His heroic image later polished by the myth-making machine, and not everyone was a fan even then. Some found his grand, aristocratic style of speaking to be out of touch with the concerns of ordinary people. The secret listeners from mass observation recorded some people muttering that it was all very well for him to talk tough, sitting safe in a bunker, while their own homes were being blown to bits. But tonight, in your dusty, blacked-out living room, none of that matters. The power of his words is undeniable. He ends his speech with a flourish, the promise that Britain will never surrender. The broadcast finishes, replaced by the somber notes of God Save the King. The room is silent for a moment. The speech hasn't changed the physical reality. The bombers are probably on their way right now. Your house is still damaged. Your rations are still meager. But something has shifted. Your resolve has been stiffened. Your fear has been alloyed with a new sense of purpose. He has given you a narrative for your suffering. He has given you a narrative for your suffering. He has given you hope. And just as you are contemplating this, you hear it. The distant, mournful wail of the air raid siren begins its nightly climb. The ritual begins again. But tonight, you feel just a little bit stronger as you head for the shelter. The weeks of the Blitz grind on, and you develop a strange kind of routine. The siren, the shelter, the all clear, the cleanup. It becomes a grimly familiar cycle. But just when you think you've adapted to the nightly terror, the war introduces a new and particularly insidious psychological threat, the unexploded bomb, or UXB. It starts one morning. You emerge from your shelter to find your street cordoned off at both ends by policemen and ARP wardens. A small, stark sign has been hammered into a wooden stake DANGE. ERUNEXPLODEDOMB. The bomb that fell last night, the one you heard land with a dull heavy thud instead of an explosion, didn't detonate. It is now lying dormant somewhere in your neighborhood, in someone's garden, buried in the road, or perhaps even nestled deep inside the structure of a building. This changes everything. The immediate, violent threat of the raid is replaced by a quiet, simmering 24/7 menace. Your street, your home, has become a minefield. You and hundreds of your neighbors are evacuated, told to report to the local rest center with only what you can carry. You are suddenly a refugee in your own city. The rest center is probably a church hall or a school gymnasium, filled with camp beds and stressed, displaced families. The atmosphere is one of boredom, anxiety, and endless speculation. Where did it land? How big is it? When can we go home? The answer to the last question is always the same when they've dealt with it. They are the bomb disposal squads, a small, elite group of men who possess a type of courage that is almost incomprehensible. These are the Royal Engineers bomb disposal companies. While everyone else runs away from a UXB, their job is to walk towards it. The process is painstakingly slow and terrifyingly dangerous. First, they have to locate the bomb precisely. Then they have to dig a deep, narrow shaft down to it, carefully shoring up the sides to prevent a collapse. This work is done with hand tools, as the vibration from heavy machinery could set the bomb off. Finally, 1 or 2 men descend into the shaft to confront the beast. Here's a chillingly technical detail about their work. German bomb fuses were notoriously complex and deliberately designed to be booby-trapped. There were wartime delay fuses, designed to go off hours or even days after landing. There were anti-handling fuses, designed to detonate if the bomb was moved or jostled. And most deviously, there were fuses with multiple, hidden mechanisms. The bomb disposal officer had to diagnose the type of fuse by sound and touch, often working by candlelight in a muddy, claustrophobic hole, and then figure out how to render it safe. It was like performing brain surgery on a patient who was actively trying to kill you. The casualty rate for these units was appalling. Many were killed instantly, leaving nothing behind but a crater. Their bravery was quiet, technical, and largely unseen by the public. They became folk heroes, figures of immense respect and awe. Children would collect shrapnel, but the ultimate prize was a piece of a deactivated German fuse, a trophy from a defeated monster. The existence of UXBS created a strange, surreal state of suspended animation in the city. A whole street could be shut down for days. A crucial factory could be put out of action. A railway line could be severed. The unexploded bomb was a weapon that kept on fighting long after the raid was over. Historians who study the psychological impact of the Blitz often point to UXBS as a key factor in grinding down civilian morale. The explosions were terrifying, but they were over quickly. The UXB introduced a prolonged, nagging anxiety. It disrupted life, created uncertainty, and served as a constant, physical reminder of the enemy's presence in your very midst. The debate continues as to whether this was a deliberate German strategy to maximize disruption or simply a result of faulty manufacturing. Either way, the effect was the same. After 2 long days in the rest center, word finally comes through: the bomb has been made safe. You are allowed to return home. As you walk back down your street, you see the bomb disposal squad's truck pulling away. A few of the men are sitting on the tailgate, smoking cigarettes, their faces etched with exhaustion. They look impossibly ordinary. You also see the crater where they worked, and sometimes the bomb itself, a large, sinister metal cylinder, now inert, waiting to be hauled away. Your street is safe again, but the knowledge that any patch of ground could be hiding one of these things is a new fear that you will carry with you long after the sirens have stopped. If you are one of the unlucky ones whose home has been destroyed or is cordoned off indefinitely due to an unexploded bomb, you face a desperate choice. The official rest centers are a temporary solution, often crowded and uncomfortable. Some people are lucky enough to have relatives in another part of the city or in the countryside. But for thousands of others, a new unofficial solution presents itself. You go underground. You become one of the tube dwellers. From the early days of the Blitz, Londoners had instinctively recognized the deep-level tube stations as the safest places to be. The government was initially very reluctant to allow this. They worried about disease, sanitation, and the disruption to the train service, which was vital for moving war workers around the city. They put up posters on locked gates, trying to discourage people from sheltering in the stations. But the people of London simply would not be denied. They bought a cheap platform ticket and refused to leave, faced with this massive, spontaneous act of civil disobedience. The authorities had no choice but to relent. So, you descend the escalator at a station like Piccadilly Circus or Leicester Square or Clapham South. You step from the dark, dangerous world of the surface into a brightly lit, noisy, and strangely vibrant subterranean city. The platforms are a sea of humanity. Every available inch is occupied. People have staked out their territory, setting up makeshift beds on the hard concrete. Families are huddled together under blankets, surrounded by their few salvaged possessions: a suitcase, a kettle, a bird, and a cage. The atmosphere is a bizarre mix of a refugee camp and a holiday camp. It's noisy, smelly, and claustrophobic. The air is thick with the scent of humanity, stale food, and the unique, metallic smell of the underground. The rumble and whoosh of the trains passing through the station every few minutes is a constant interruption. Yet, there is also a sense of community and, above all, a feeling of absolute safety. Down here, 100 feet below the surface, the bombs are a distant, muffled rumor. You can finally relax your perpetually tensed muscles. You can sleep. This is where you see human ingenuity at its finest. People created little homes for themselves. They hung blankets from the station signs to create a semblance of privacy. They organized committees to manage cleaning and keep order. Unofficial shelter marshals emerged, just like the shelter bosses in the public shelters, to mediate disputes and look after the vulnerable. Here's a fascinating, unheartwarming detail: whole social infrastructure sprang up on the platforms. The London Passenger Transport Board, having accepted the inevitable, started to provide services. They installed chemical toilets, a massive improvement on the bucket in the quarter system, and eventually bunk beds for thousands of people. Mobile canteens would set up on the platforms, serving tea and snacks. Impromptu concerts would be held, with someone playing a harmonica or an accordion. A lending library was even established at one station, with books passed from hand to hand. But historians, as always, present a more complicated picture. While the story of the cheerful, resilient dwellers is a powerful part of the Blitz myth, the reality was tougher. The conditions were often unsanitary, and diseases like influenza, scabies, and diphtheria were a constant concern for the medical authorities. There was friction too. Arguments over space, noise, and accusations of queue jumping for the best spots were common. Rather than just shelter there during raids was a point of contention. Were they genuine victims, or were they taking advantage of the situation to get free, safe lodging? The most famous of the tube shelters was the Aldwych, a station on a little-used branch of the Piccadilly line. Because it had very few trains, it was officially turned into a permanent shelter. It became a model community, with a theater, a chapel, and even a nursery. Precious artworks from the British Museum were stored in the tunnels beyond the platform, sharing the deep earth safety with the city's human treasures. You find a small space on the platform, lay down your blanket, and try to get some rest. The bright lights never go out. The noise never completely stops, but for the first time in weeks, you feel a profound sense of security. You are part of a new, nocturnal tribe, the citizens of underground London. You are a tube dweller, living a strange, mole-like existence, waiting for the day when it's safe to return to the sun. There is a particular kind of dread that is reserved for parents. The fear for your own life is one thing, the fear for your child's life is something else entirely. It is a constant, gut-wrenching anxiety that gnaws at you during every raid. As the Blitz drags on, with no end in sight, the government reopens a program that forces you to confront an impossible choice. This is the choice of evacuation. The idea is simple and logical: move the children from the high-risk cities to the relative safety of the countryside. The first wave of evacuation happened right at the start of the war, during the phony war, but many children drifted back to the city, when the expected bombing failed to materialize. Now, with London burning, the program is revived with a new and desperate urgency. You sit at your kitchen table and look at your child. You look at their small, innocent face, and you have to weigh two unbearable options. Do you keep them here with you in the city of sirens and shelters, where they could be killed or maimed at any moment, or do you send them away, alone, to live with complete strangers in a place you've never seen? To protect them from physical harm, you have to inflict a deep, emotional wound. It is a decision with no good answer. After nights of agonizing debate, you make the heartbreaking choice. You choose safety. You register your child for the evacuation scheme. The day of departure is one of the bleakest of your life. You take your child, who is probably no older than 10, to the local school, which has become a marshalling point. You've packed their life into a single small suitcase. Pinned to their coat is a cardboard label, just like a luggage tag. On it is their name, their home address, and their destination. They are clutching their gas mask in its cardboard box and perhaps a favorite toy. They look small, bewildered, and terrified. You join a long line of other parents and children, a silent, miserable procession to the nearest train station. The platform is a scene of organized chaos and quiet despair. Teachers and WVS volunteers try to keep the children in orderly groups, their voices unnaturally cheerful. You see children crying openly for their mothers. You see others putting on a brave face, their bottom lips trembling. And here's a small, devastating detail that many evacuees remembered for the rest of their lives: the food they were given for the journey. Each child was typically handed a paper bag containing a sandwich, an apple, and a bar of chocolate. For many children from poorer parts of London, that bar of chocolate was an unimaginable luxury. The bittersweet memory of being given this wonderful treat on the worst day of their lives was something that stayed with them forever. You get to the carriage door. This is it, the moment of separation. You give your child one last fierce hug. You whisper reassurances you don't feel. Be a good boy, girl. Write to us. We'll see you soon. You have no idea when you will actually see them again. You lift them onto the train, and the door is closed by a volunteer. You stand on the platform as the train full of children slowly pulls away. You see your child's small face pressed against the window, getting smaller and smaller, until they are just a blur. The platform is filled with parents, mostly mothers, standing in stunned silence. Then, as the train disappears from view, the carefully maintained composure breaks, and a wave of quiet, helpless sobbing ripples through the crowd. The evacuees is a topic that has generated a huge body of historical research, memoirs, and fiction. For some, it was a grand adventure. They were sent to kind families on farms, where they discovered a world of green fields, fresh air, and animals they had only ever seen in books. But for many others, it was a traumatic experience. They were often treated as unwelcome burdens, exploited as cheap labor, or bullied for their city accents in different ways. The clash of cultures between the urban poor and the rural communities was a real and often painful phenomenon, something the official, cheerful narrative of evacuation tended to gloss over. You walk home from the station to a house that is now unnervingly quiet. The silence is a constant, heavy reminder of your child's absence. You tell yourself you did the right thing. You tell yourself they are safe, but a part of you feels like you have failed, like you have abandoned your most precious responsibility. The bombers can destroy your house and your city, but this, the voluntary breaking of your own family, feels like the most profound and painful wound of the war. Huddled in your shelter, listening to the familiar, terrifying drone of the engines overhead, it is almost impossible to imagine the perspective of the men causing this mayhem. To you, they are a monstrous, faceless force, a terrifying them. But up there, 15,000 feet above the burning city, they are young men, sitting in the cold, vibrating belly of a Heinkel or a Junkers bomber. Let's try, for a moment, to step into their flying boots. Imagine you are a 22-year-old navigator, let's call you Klaus. You have been flying for hours, first over the dark fields of occupied France, then over the black, cold expanse of the English Channel. The inside of the bomber is cramped, noisy, and freezing cold. The only light comes from the dim glow of your instrument panel. Your job is to guide your pilot to a single point on a map, a point that you know is a city teeming with millions of people. The mood in the aircraft is probably not one of maniacal glee. It's more likely a mixture of professional focus, exhaustion, and a deep, gnawing fear. You are flying into the most heavily defended airspace in the world. As you cross the coast, you see the first signs of it. Searchlight beams, dozens of them, begin to sweep the sky, probing the darkness for you. They are beautiful and terrifying. Long white fingers trying to catch you. Then comes the yak-yak fire. The sky around you starts to be pockmarked with black puffs of smoke from the bursting anti-aircraft shells. You hear the shrapnel from a close burst rattle against the fuselage of your plane like thrown gravel. A piece could easily tear through the thin aluminum skin and hit a fuel line, or an engine, or you. Your pilot is taking evasive action, making the plane dip and swerve. It's nauseating, and you are looking for the fighters. The Spitfires and Hurricanes of the RAF. The German bomber crews called them Leichen Vogel corpse birds. The terror of being caught by a night fighter, seeing the stream of tracer fire ripping towards your aircraft, is a constant dread. Your gunners are scanning the sky, their eyes straining in the darkness. This brings us to a grim, but fascinating point of historical debate. What was the actual motivation and mindset of these German airqueers? Post-war interviews and diaries paint a complex picture. Many were ardent Nazis, true believers in the cause, convinced they were striking a righteous blow against an evil empire. Others were simply career airmen, patriots serving their country who tried to detach themselves from the consequences of their actions. A surprising number were apolitical, caught up in the machinery of war, just trying to do their job and survive their tour of duty. They weren't all monsters, but they were the agents of a monstrous act. A particularly surreal detail that emerges from their accounts is the view. From your high vantage point, the burning city of London is a terrifyingly, tragically beautiful spectacle. It's not a collection of homes and streets. It's an abstract pattern of red and orange against a black background. The fires you helped start are your signposts. The bend in the River Thames, reflecting the flames, is your guide. One pilot famously described it as a sea of fire. This aesthetic appreciation of the destruction they were causing was a crucial psychological coping mechanism. Finally, you are over the target area. The bomb bay doors grind open, letting in a rush of freezing air. The bombardier, lying on his stomach in the nose of the plane, peers through his bomb sight. He gives the final corrections. Then he shouts, "Bomb's gone!" The aircraft lurches upwards, suddenly lighter. Your mission is complete. Your only job now is to survive the journey home. You turn back, leaving the glowing, burning chaos behind you. You might feel a sense of triumph, of a job well done. You might feel a surge of relief that you are still alive. You might feel a pang of something more complex, a flicker of doubt or guilt about what you have just done. Or you might feel nothing at all, just a cold, professional exhaustion. Back in your shelter in London, you hear the drone of an engine begin to fade into the distance. For you, it's a moment of hope, a sign that the raid might be ending. For Klaus, the young navigator, it's the sound of heading home, leaving the consequences of his work far below. The vast dark sky separates two completely different human experiences of the same terrible night. You are now deep into the winter of 1940 and the spring of 1941. The nightly ritual of the Blitz has become a grim, exhausting part of your life. You have forgotten what a full night's sleep feels like. Every night, the sirens wail and the bombs fall. It feels like it will never end. But then, slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, something begins to change. It starts in April. There are still raids. some of them terrifyingly heavy. The raid on April 16th is one of the worst of the entire war, a devastating attack that causes massive damage and casualties. It feels like a cruel joke, a sign that any hope is misplaced. But after that peak, the rhythm starts to shift. You might have a night where the sirens sound, but the bombing is light and sporadic, concentrated on another part of the city. You spend the night in the shelter, tense and waiting, but the earth-shattering explosions you've become accustomed to never come. You emerge in the morning feeling strangely cheated, yet relieved. Then, an even stranger thing happens. A night passes with no siren at all. The first time it happens, you don't trust it. You lie in your bed, fully clothed, waiting for the wail that never comes. You can't sleep properly. The silence is more unnerving than the noise. Your body is so conditioned to the nightly adrenaline spike that its absence feels wrong, like a phantom limb. You wake up the next morning feeling more tired than if there had been a raid, but then it happens again, 2 nights in a row without a siren. A cautious, fragile sense of hope begins to sprout. Could it be, is it ending? People start talking about it in the queues in the pubs. Quiet last night, wasn't it? Maybe they're running out of planes. The speculation is rampant. The reason for this change is, of course, a huge strategic shift in the war. Something you on the ground can only guess at. Hitler, frustrated by the RAF's refusal to be terrorized into submission, has turned his attention eastward. He is secretly preparing for a massive new gamble, the invasion of the Soviet Union. Operation Barbarossa, the Luftwaffe squadrons that have been tormenting your city, are being quietly withdrawn from their bases in France and redeployed to the east. A small but telling piece of evidence for this shift was the changing nature of the bombs. The bomb disposal squads noted that towards the end of this period, they were finding more bombs with very long delay fuses, some set for over 80 hours. The historical debate here is whether this was a deliberate final act of psychological warfare designed to keep the city on edge even as the bombers left, or simply a way of using up old stock of a now less useful weapon. The final massive raid on London happens on the night of May 10th, 1941st. It is a terrifying crescendo, a last, furious spasm of violence. The Luftwaffe throws everything it has left at the city. The damage is immense. The Houses of Parliament are hit. The chamber of the House of Commons is destroyed, and fires rage across the capital. That feels like the worst night of all, a devastating blow. But after that night of fire and fury, an almost unbelievable quiet descends. 1 night passes, then a week, then 2, then 2. The nightly drone of the bombers, the soundtrack to your life for 8 long months, is gone. The silence is no longer unnerving, it's blissful. You start to sleep in your own bed again. It feels like an incredible luxury. You tentatively take down the heavy blackout curtains, letting the evening light into your home for the first time in almost 2 years. It feels daring, almost rebellious. The city breathes a collective sigh of relief. The constant, daily tension that has been your companion for so long begins to unwind. The first phase of the Blitz is over. You have endured. You have endured. You have survived. The war is far from won, and London will face new threats in the years to come, the little Blitzen, the terrifying V-weapons. But for now, the long, dark night has ended. The sky which you had learned to fear once again becomes just the sky. And for the first time in a very long time, you look forward to the dawn. The silence of the nights is followed by the noise of a city trying to heal. It's the summer of 1941st. The sun is warm, the days are long, and for the first time in what feels like a lifetime, the sky is just a sky, not a source of imminent dread. You take a walk through London, not to get somewhere, but just to look. You are exploring a new city, one that has been built on the ruins of the old one you knew. The most obvious scars are the gaps. You walk down a familiar terrace of Victorian houses, all red brick and white painted window frames. And then, suddenly, there is just nothing. A vacant space, like a missing tooth in a smile. The houses on either side of the gap have their interior wallpaper exposed to the elements, a ghostly, intimate record of a home that no longer exists. You can see the faint outline of where a fireplace used to be, a pale rectangle on the exposed brick. These empty lots, universally known as bomb sites, have become a new and defining feature of the London landscape. They are everywhere. Some are just neat piles of rubble, the bricks and timbers salvaged for reuse. Others are still a chaotic jumble of wreckage, slowly being colonized by nature. And this is where you see a strange and unexpected beauty. From the rubble and the dust, new life is sprouting. A particular plant, a tall weed with vibrant pinkish-purple flowers, seems to be growing on every bomb site. It's called Rose Bay Willower, but it quickly earns a new name, bombweed. It becomes a symbol of the city's resilience, a splash of defiant color in the gray wasteland. These sites also become the unofficial playgrounds for the city's children. They build dens in the ruins. They climb the piles of rubble, turning a scene of adult tragedy into a landscape for childhood adventure. You continue your walk, and you notice the less dramatic scars. You see a building that is still standing, but its face is pockmarked and peppered with shrapnel holes. You see a pub where one entire wall has been rebuilt with new, differently colored bricks, a visible patch on the city's skin. Windows are still boarded up or fitted with cheap, thin glass that ripples when you look at it. The city is a patchwork of the old, the damaged, and the temporarily repaired. Even the grand landmarks bear the wounds. You look at Street Paul's Cathedral, its famous dome miraculously intact, but you can see the damage to the surrounding chapels and the fresh stonework where repairs have begun. The Houses of Parliament are shrouded in scaffolding. The city wears its scars openly, a testament to what it has endured. This physical destruction leads to a fascinating and contentious debate that would shape London for the rest of the 20th century. What should be done with these bomb sites for city planners and modernist architects? The Blitz, in a terrible way, was a golden opportunity. It had wiped the slate clean. It had cleared away what they saw as unhealthy, cramped Victorian slums. They saw these empty lots not as scars, but as a blank canvas on which to build a new, utopian London, a city of wide open spaces, high-rise apartment blocks, and efficient road systems. On the other side of this debate were those who mourned the loss of the old city. They argued that the Blitz didn't just destroy buildings, it destroyed communities. It shattered the intricate, centuries-old social fabric of the neighborhoods. The planners' visions of a rational, modern city, they argued, would create a landscape that was sterile and anonymous, disconnected from its own history. This tension between preserving the past and building a new future, between community and concrete, is a scar that runs deep through the story of post-war London, and historians are still arguing about the consequences. Your own internal map of the city has been scarred too. You navigate by memory and absence. You find yourself thinking, I'll turn right at the corner where the bakery used to be, or I'll meet you on the spot that was once the cinema. The city is haunted by the ghosts of its former self. You end your walk on a bridge over the Thames, looking out over the scarred skyline. The destruction is vast, heartbreaking, but you also see the signs of life. The cranes are already moving. The sounds of hammering and construction are beginning to compete with the traffic. The city did not die. It was wounded terribly, but it is already beginning to heal. The scars, you realize, are not just marks of injury, they are the proof of survival. The war is not over. You know this. You hear it on the wireless. There are still battles raging in distant deserts and on vast frozen plains. But for you here in London, a very specific kind of war has ended. The war against the sky. The immediate, nightly threat has receded, leaving behind a profound and echoing silence. You have survived, but you are not the same person who stood in a sun-drenched park 2 years ago, watching men dig trenches. The Blitz has ended, but it continues to live inside you. You notice it in small, involuntary ways. A car backfire in the street makes you flinch, your heart leaping into your throat before your conscious mind can reassure you. The sudden slam of a door can make your muscles tense, bracing for a blast wave that never comes. You find yourself scanning the sky on an overcast day, looking for specks that aren't there. You have a new intimate relationship with loud noises, with the simple act of being inside a building. These are the survivor's tics, the little physical echoes of a terror that has seeped into your nervous system. Your entire sense of value has been recalibrated. You feel a surge of pure, uncomplicated joy at things you once took for granted. A full night of uninterrupted sleep feels like the greatest luxury on earth. An unbroken window, a roof that doesn't leak, a quiet evening spent reading by the fire. These are not mundane details anymore. They are treasures. They are the spoils of a war you have won. You have a new appreciation for the profound beauty of boredom, the simple, glorious state of nothing happening. This immense psychological shift is the great, unwritten story of the Blitz. While newspapers and propaganda focused on the physical destruction and the heroic spirit, the quiet, internal landscape of millions of Londoners had been permanently altered. There was no vocabulary for it then, no therapy or counseling. It was just a quiet, private burden that everyone carried differently. Some people became more outgoing, determined to live every moment to the fullest, their emotional reserves completely drained. This leads to one of the most enduring debates among historians and sociologists. What was the true, long-term social impact of the Blitz? Did the shared experience of suffering in the shelters truly create a more egalitarian, unified Britain? As some idealists hoped, did it break down the rigid class barriers, proving that everyone was equal under the bombs, or did it simply reinforce them in new ways? The evidence is deeply ambiguous. For every story of a duchess sharing her tea with a docker in a public shelter, there's another story of the wealthy retreating to their country estates or paying exorbitant prices on the black market, insulating themselves from the worst of the suffering. The Blitz was a shared experience, but it was not an equal one. You see the children returning now, the evacuees coming back to a city they barely recognize. They are taller, their accents have changed, and there is a strange distance in their eyes as they look at parents who have become near strangers. The reunions are often awkward, tinged with a sadness for the lost years. The attempt to save them from one kind of trauma has inadvertently created another. You sit on a bench in a park, the summer sun on your face. A group of children are playing on a nearby bomb site, their laughter echoing among the ruins and the defiant purple balm weed. They are playing games of war, their shouts of bang, bang, a pale imitation of the reality you lived through. You are a veteran of a war fought in your own home. You carry the memories, the scars both visible and invisible. You are a living testament to the fact that a city is not just its buildings, but the resilience of its people. The ordeal is over, and now you have to learn how to live in the quiet world that comes after. And so, the story settles around you, its sharp edges softened by time and distance. The memory of the sirens begins to fade, replaced by the gentle hum of the world outside your window. The darkness is no longer a threat, but a soft, quiet blanket, an invitation to rest. Think of the millions of tiny, individual stories, like the one you just walked through, all the fear and refusal to give in, all of it now just dust motes dancing in the long, quiet moonbeam of history. Your own bed is your shelter now, deep and safe and warm. There are no alarms here, no need to brace for impact. The only thing descending is a gentle, welcome tiredness. Let the silence be your comfort, a sign that all is well. Let the quiet rhythm of your own breathing be your all-clear signal. The tale is told. The city is quiet. And it is time at long last for a peaceful night's sleep. The end of the article. Good night.